Chapter 486. Hey, you haven't said if you want us or not. After playing around for a while, the girl named Kevin Carter came over and looked at Jiang Hai with some anger. Because of the play just now, the girl's face couldn't help sweating a little. Because her skin color is a little dark, even if she blushes, Jiang Hai can't see it. You? Didn't you just say yourself? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment and said to her, I thought about it. If there is such a good yacht to sit on, it wouldn't be good if I don't take them, so I decided to take them, but they don't need money. Even if it's just for a ride, I'll be the only one making money. How about it? If you miss this opportunity, there won't be another one. Looking at Jiang Hai, Kevin Carter said with a serious face, as if Jiang Hai really took a big advantage. Looking at her, Jiang Hai smiled. These girls are really funny. Hey little beauty, don't tell me you like our boss? It's right to like him, young, rich and handsome Tiske. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't speak, Belle Lester couldn't help but tease Kevin Carter. Like him? How is that possible? Glancing at Belle with disdain, Kevin said with a look of displeasure. Since you don't like our boss, then you must like me if you want to get on our boat. Speaking of this, Belle deliberately wiped his hair and said in a showy manner. Then I like him. But unfortunately, Kevin didn't give him a chance to be narcissistic and turned her head and said directly. Haha, thank you. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It's actually good to attack this Belle. Hey, if you don't like me and you don't like our boss, then why do we have to use you? Hearing her words, Bale was a little annoyed. He slammed the table and said to her, Don't worry. What? Even as a tour guide, there are still unspoken rules. Perhaps once you Americans reveal your identity, there will be plenty of women who want to accompany you because they want the money in your pockets. However, we don't care about your pocket money. If you really want us to accompany you, it's not impossible. Bring us to America, bring us, and we'll accompany you. After Kevin finished speaking, his originally playful gaze instantly brightened. If these people could really take him to America, then there was nothing wrong with accompanying them. However, when he heard his words, Jiang Hai chuckled. He wasn't that interested in these things that had a price tag. Forget it. I don't want to take you to the United States for the time being. However, if you want to be a guide, I can consider it. Tell me your price. Jiang Hai gently knocked on the table, attracting everyone's attention, and then asked. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, the guests at other tables in this restaurant couldn't help but sigh. Everyone knows that it's a good job to be a guide for these Americans. Not only can they sit on a big boat, but they also have good food to eat. The most important thing is that these Americans are very generous, especially this young man. He can drive such a good yacht here, which proves that this guy is not short of money. However, they still opened their mouths too late, and these little girls snatched the business away. I just said, even if the three of them go out to play, I only charge $50. Looking at Jiang Hai, Kevin said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his chin. $50? That's not expensive or cheap. However, Jiang Hai didn't care. He came out to fish for tuna for nothing more than to have fun. Since she can come and help, Jiang Hai didn't care. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai nodded and then said, I can give you $50, but there's a problem. I don't know if you're bluffing me or not. If the place you take us to tomorrow has a good harvest, not to mention $50, even $100 is fine. But if we're not satisfied, then I don't want $50. Kevin waved her hand. In fact, this matter didn't have any loss for her. After all, even if she didn't spend money, it was a very good deal for her to go on a trip on the boat. After all, they had nothing to do. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was too lazy to argue with this little girl. He smiled and nodded in agreement. I'll look for you on your boat at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Remember to get up early, or you won't be able to catch a big fish. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, the girl immediately smiled and responded. After making a face at the three girls at the table next to her, she slapped a few dollars on the table, which was the money they had to pay for the meal, and then quickly ran away. Looking at the appearance of these girls, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He was happy to help others. Boss? Do you like them? Seeing Jiang Hai smile, Belle said with a sly smile. Like your head. Jiang Hai gave the guy with a crooked smile a middle finger and continued to sit there and wait. Not long after, half of the fish was served. Just as the waiter said, most of the food here could only be eaten in 4 ways. This half of the fish wasn't small, so they also cooked it in 4 ways: stewed, roasted, boiled, and fried. Although it looked very strange, the taste was still acceptable except for the fishy smell. Puerto Rico's way of eating is a mix of South America and the United States. Americans eat sweet and sour, while South Americans eat sweet and spicy. So these 3 fish were almost all sour, sweet, and spicy. Although the taste was a bit strange, it had a different flavor. After eating a little, they packed up the rest. These were to be taken back to the boat for Azalina and the others. After eating, they didn't immediately return to the boat. Instead, they strolled around the town because they still had a lot of things to buy. The captain of the guard said that oil could be added at the dock, but they still had to prepare other things. For example, fresh water, some famous fruits, cocoa, and some beer. Because sailing at sea was very boring, the consumption of these things was not small because there was really nothing to do. There was no internet or Wi-Fi at sea. Jiang Hai had a satellite TV, but he could only watch it. When there was nothing to do, it was a good choice to drink a little at sea, so Jiang Hai and the others consumed a lot of alcohol. This time, they naturally consumed a lot of alcohol in Puerto Rico. So after shopping around, they came to the only bar in the town. As soon as they walked in, they heard a lot of noise coming from inside. Of course, this noise didn't come from the music, but from the guests in the bar. When Jiang Hai and Belle walked in, many people saw them, but unlike the people in the restaurant who were full of curiosity, the people here continued to talk loudly after glancing at Jiang Hai and the others. Glancing around the bar, the environment of this bar was not very good. Many men were crowded in this small bar, either bragging or flirting with girls. The smell of alcohol mixed with the smell of sweat became the main theme in this small space. Among these people, there were many young girls squeezed among these men. They didn't care about the smell of these men. Instead, they thought it was the smell of men. If they took a fancy to one, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't go home at night. This was a Western bar, and Jiang Hai was not interested in it. However, looking at the bar, everything was quite complete, so after Jiang Hai entered, he sat directly in front of the bar. "What do you want?" Looking at Jiang Hai sitting here, the bartender, who was mixing drinks, asked Jiang Hai in curly English. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai understood what he meant. "2 glasses of the best wine you have here." Jiang Hai looked at the man, smiled, took out a grant, $50, and stuffed it into the wine glass next to him. He had already seen the sign hanging behind the bartender. The best wine only cost $12 a glass. Jiang Hai gave more as his tip. Seeing this, the man couldn't help but laugh and immediately began to mix the drinks. "Hey boss, the girls here are so hot." At this time, Belle also patrolled around, sat next to Jiang Hai and said excitedly. Along the way, this guy can be regarded as the little prince of the nightclub. His recognition was not ordinary. No matter how hot you are, you should pay attention to it. Don't cause trouble. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai knew that this guy was not going to go back to the boat at night, but it didn't matter. With his skills, Jiang Hai was not worried that he would suffer. "Don't worry, boss." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also knew that Jiang Hai allowed him to take a break. His eyes lit up instantly. Chapter 487. Listening to Belle's flirting skills, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips. He really didn't care. Although Jiang Hai is a casual person, under normal circumstances he won't be too casual, especially when the situation is not very clear, so he just looked at the people in the distance who are fighting, then picked up the wine in front of him and took a sip. "Brother, what good wine do you have here?" Looking at the bartender who is still playing with the glasses, Jiang Hai asked him. "Beer or white wine?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the bartender looked at him and asked. For Jiang Hai, a customer who is willing to spend money, his attitude is very good, and his face is smiling. Of course, the white wine in his mouth is not the white wine in China but the foreign wine. "Either is fine, I'll ask first." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shrugged and said to him. "Beer is mainly bottled Corona and Buheimer, and we also have homemade beer and it's very cheap, but I advise you not to try it because you may not be used to it. As for white wine, we mainly sell rum here. If you want, the quality of this thing is quite good." Looking at Jiang Hai, the bartender here said seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also touched his chin. He has heard of Corona and Buheimer before, but he really hasn't tasted them before. He remembered that he saw a post on the internet, mainly introducing the top 10 best-selling beers in the world. Among them, the most powerful is Wuxia Snow, which has been ranked first in the world for many years. Of course, the main sales target is the Chinese. In foreign countries, especially in the Western world, almost no one knows what kind of beer Snow is, and few people have drunk it. Everyone agrees that the best-selling beer in the world is Budweiser light beer, which is also rare in China. Because it is a very light beer, and there is a clear lemon flavor. It is more like a cocktail than a beer, but it has the taste of beer. The 8% concentration is very good, and it is somewhat similar to the fruit beer in China. Jiang Hai also likes this beer. He bought this beer when he was in the United States. In third place was the normal Budweiser beer, and in fourth place was Corona beer. The origin of this beer was Mexico. It tasted similar to light beer, but the concentration was slightly higher. If anyone could drink light beer, then this wine would make people unknowingly drink too much. However, this beer brand was later acquired by Budweiser. Currently, it was mainly sold in the American market, especially in the southern part of the country. Ranked 5th is Schirau beer. This beer is not a major brand in the US, UK, or Wuxia. Few people had seen this beer. Its main markets were Africa and South America, but it was not available in Puerto Rico either. In 6th place was Heineken. There was no need to introduce them further. In 7th place was Silver Bullet. Chapter 488. Whatever you say, boss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl named Kevin from yesterday also said excitedly. When Jiang Hai went to the cabin to call them, these girls were also very bold, regardless of whether Jiang Hai is a bad guy or not. They just sat directly on the sofa of Jiang Hai's yacht, feeling the touch of the leather sofa under their buttocks. It really made them extremely excited. They have never been to such a good place before. Just as they were touching here and there and looking around curiously, Jiang Hai had also called Delina and the others. After everyone got up, they first went to wash their faces and brush their teeth, then Delina and Marian went to help Jiang Hai make breakfast. As for Belle, Azalina, and Harriman also came to the living room. When Belle saw these girls, his eyes narrowed and he greeted them with a smile. Unfortunately, these girls were not very interested in Belle. Only one of them smiled and nodded to him as a greeting. The other 3 girls directly ignored him and whispered to each other. Not long after, Jiang Hai and the others came out with a large pot of soup. This is the first dish Jiang Hai learned to make after coming to the United States, besides frying steak, cheddar soup. Speaking of this soup, it is a very famous food in the Boston area. This thing is traditionally called New England clam cheddar soup, but after coming to Boston, you can actually put anything you want in it. Even if you want to put lobsters, crabs, and other things in it, you can put them in. Jiang Hai put some big shrimps this time. Compared to clams, he prefers to eat these things. Of course, there are also chopped abalone, sea cucumber slices, and some clam meat in it. Of course, there are also dough balls in it. If you just drink the steam, you won't be full. This is the first time Kevin and the others drank this kind of soup. After drinking it, they couldn't help but give Jiang Hai a thumbs up. Really tastes good. After all, Jiang Hai's products are all things he brought from his manor. We're full, so we're about to set off. Tell me, where should we go? Not long after, the meal was almost finished. Kevin's 3 companions were still very conscious. They knew that after eating Jiang Hai's food, it was necessary to help clean up. So after everyone finished eating, they carried their bowls into the kitchen, and Jiang Hai asked Kevin, "What is it?" "That depends on what you want to catch. If you want to catch tuna, you have to drive east. If you want to catch lobsters, you have to drive southeast." Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kevin stood up, picked up his phone and zoomed in on the screen. Then he told Jiang Hai about it. It seems that she really knows the environment here very well. According to her, different fish go to different waters. The barracuda had to go to the northeast, and the tuna had to go to the east because the sea there was deeper and there were more tuna. Not only were there ordinary tuna, but there were also mini bluefin and yellowfin tuna. However, there was a problem. If they caught these fish, it would be troublesome to sell them. Although there were people who collected fish in Puerto Rico, the price was not high. If you want to sell them at a high price, you have to go back to Miami to sell them. The price difference is about 20%. Jiang Hai doesn't care about this, because this is not his main purpose. If he really catches a rare fish, then he can also chill the fish or freeze it directly. Of course, the price will be reduced if he freezes it. However, Jiang Hai doesn't care about the small amount of money. He has enough bluefin tuna in his fishing farm. He came here to have fun. After confirming that he caught tuna, Jiang Hai also started the engine. After Belle went to the shore to untie the rope, he quickly rushed back to the boat. Then the boat rushed to the east as Kevin said. With the departure of the ship, the fog on the surface of the sea completely dispersed. The warm sunlight shone on the sea. The sea absorbed a small amount of heat, but most of it was reflected into the air, causing the temperature of the sea to rise rapidly. At 8:30 a.m., the temperature outside had already reached 20 degrees Celsius. Seeing this, Kevin and the other girls couldn't sit still in the living room anymore. Therefore, they directly took off their jackets and trousers in front of Delina, Marian, Azaviel, Harriman, and Belle. In a split second, they had already put on a set of bikini swimsuits. Are you going out to swim? The boat is still sailing. Looking at them, Delina felt that it was necessary to remind these girls who were about the same age as her. Of course not. Although the weather outside is hot, the sea water is still very cold. We are preparing to go fishing. We took off our clothes because it would be troublesome if we accidentally fell into the sea or got scratched. Hearing Delina's words, Kevin also smiled and said with a serious expression on his face, "Fishing? Okay, I'll call Jiang." Hearing that they were going to start fishing, Delina was stunned for a moment. Then she ran to the captain's cabin to call Jiang Hai. To be honest, Jiang Hai was also interested in fishing. After setting the coordinates and letting the boat sail automatically, Jiang Hai took his fishing equipment and walked out of the cabin. Although Jiang Hai hadn't fished for tuna before, Edward Anderson and the other old sailors were experts in fishing for tuna. Therefore, they have already prepared everything for Jiang Hai to fish for tuna. For example, there are 5 or 6 poles with thick fishing lines and bait that tuna likes. Now the boat is still sailing, although the speed is not particularly fast. However, it was impossible to use 5 or 6 fishing rods directly, so Jiang Hai could only use 1 fishing rod. However, Jiang Hai wasn't very clear about what he was going to catch. Even if it was kept in a pool on the shore, it would die quickly. So what they had to do now was to drain its blood before it died. It was true that fish were cold-blooded animals, but it didn't mean that their blood was always cold. The so-called cold-blooded animals referred to the blood in their bodies, which would change according to the changes in the surrounding temperature. It didn't mean that their blood was cold. When they were fishing, the fish was constantly struggling. After exercise, people's blood would become hot, let alone fish. When the fish's blood was hot, if the fish died, the blood would enter the fish's meat and produce lactic acid, which would make the fish taste very bad, especially for tuna, which had to be eaten raw. Jiang Hai and the rest didn't know much about this, but fortunately Kevin understood it very well. Under her command, Belle hung the fish up. Then Harriman killed the fish and drained its blood. After cleaning up the blood, Harmanley and Belle laughed. To be honest, they were just starting to feel the joy of having fun. In the first 8 days it was basically Jiang Hai playing, and they just watched TV and enjoyed the scenery. Now that there was something they could do, they were still very happy. This fish is about 130 kilograms. According to our standards, if the meat is good, it can be sold for more than $1,000. Uncle, since this fish was caught on your boat, let's split it half and half. After thinking about it, Kevin looked at Jiang Hai and said excitedly. She went to sea with Jiang Hai and didn't care about the $50 guide fee. She was doing this for these fish. One must know that catching this fish is equivalent to her family's monthly income. No need, it's all yours. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also waved his hand. He didn't care about this small amount of money. What he cared about was that since Kevin and the others knew that he was the father of Delina and Marion, they no longer called him boss but uncle. These guys really didn't learn anything good. Hearing Jiang Hai say that the money from selling the fish would be his, Kevin also narrowed her eyes and smiled. She immediately took Harriman and brought the fish into the ice room that Jiang Hai had prepared. There, Jiang Hai specially prepared a water silo for the fish that he caught. He put a lot of ice in it to keep the fish fresh and tender. Uncle, do you want me to give you a line? After working for a long time, Kevin also came out of the water silo. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little speechless, she couldn't help but tease Jiang Hai with a smile. In her opinion, Jiang Hai's fishing rods were useless. No need. Although they were having fun playing with each other, Jiang Hai also had self-respect. It was not so easy to make him surrender like this. He knew that he got hooked. Then he straightened the fishing rod in an instant and then quickly turned the rollers. Jiang Hai and these girls had one thing in common, that is, he also liked violence. Moreover, ordinary fish really couldn't withstand his violence. He felt that the pulling force of this fish under the water at this time might be the strongest among all the fish he had ever caught. It was even stronger than the first time his big fool was hooked. But he was no longer the same person as before. In the past, he only had the strength of a human, but he could easily deal with this fish. Not to mention now, Jiang Hai directly picked up the fishing rod, then began to turn the rollers quickly. If the other fishermen saw him like this, their jaws would probably drop off in shock. What kind of joke is this? Usually when people fight with fish, the person will drag the fish out of the water until it's tired. Jiang Hai is now directly forcing the fish out of the water. Is there a mistake? Is this a joke? When did the battle between a person and a fish become a competition of strength? And most importantly, when did a person on the shore have the strength of a fish? Seeing Jiang Hai pulling the fish back, Kevin and the others looked at each other. The other 3 girls curled their lips because they thought that if the fish can be pulled back like this, it proves that the fish is not big. But Kevin faintly felt that something was wrong because the fish stirred up a lot of waves in the distance. Just as she was a little curious, a long dorsal fin that was bigger than the one she had just caught emerged from the water. It shone with a strange golden light under the sunlight. Seeing this, her mouth couldn't help but turn into an O shape in surprise. Oh my god, it's also a yellowfin and it looks like it's bigger than Kevin's. Seeing this scene, the three girls next to her were also stunned. What's going on? Is there anyone who can catch this kind of fish with pure strength? Simple and crude, without a trace of skill to speak of, but it still caught the fish. Looking at the straight line that was almost as thick as a chopstick, they couldn't help but sigh for the fish. This fellow was really unlucky to have provoked a humanoid magical beast. This yellowfin tuna is clearly not a good fish, and the most important thing is that it is still very strong. Jiang Hai did not slip away from it, nor did he fight it but directly pulled it over. A tuna that can grow so big is destined to be not young, and it is very likely that it has been caught by others before. Seeing that it was not Jiang Hai's opponent and was getting closer and closer to the floating platform, the fish did not panic and run around. Instead, it accelerated and rushed to the bottom of the boat. This is also a trick of the tuna rushing to the hull. If the fishing line is scratched by the bottom of the boat, it can be easily broken. Would Jiang Hai give it such a chance to escape? In such an unknown area, he must have a weapon with him. I have one too, it will be fine. Seeing that Belle also had a weapon with him, Jiang Hai smiled, then said casually. Then they walked to the bar counter and gently knocked on the table to call over the bartender from yesterday. 2 glasses of the wine you made yesterday, 5 boxes of beer and a box of rum. Looking at the bartender, Jiang Hai took out a stack of Franklins from his pocket, which was one of his gains today. However, when he took out the money, he felt that the breathing of many people in the bar had quickened. Feeling this scene, Jiang Hai smiled. He just likes the feeling of walking on a tightrope. He took out a few bills and threw them on the bartender's table. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the bartender quickly put away the money and started to adjust the drinks. If we are you, I will leave after this drink and I will send the wine to your boat. After adjusting the drinks and serving a glass to Jiang Hai and Belle, the bartender whispered to Jiang Hai. Why? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also raised his eyebrows and asked. Your business in the fishing company has been spread here, understand? Hearing Jiang Hai ask why, the bartender couldn't help but frown. Did this guy take too much medicine? It's so obvious, is there a need to ask why? Thank you, this is your tip, remember to send the wine to my boat. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was still surprised, but the bartender was also kind. After taking out another Franklin's and handing it to the bartender, Jiang Hai slowly tasted the wine. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care, the bartender didn't say anything. He had already reminded him, so it's not his fault if he didn't listen. Therefore, the bartender started mixing the drinks again and pretended not to know anything.